Yes, go for it.
Great. Well, thanks, Greg, for coming to see us.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to visiting with you. And I'd love, as we're getting started, just to do introductions,
Let's
hear
do
a
that.
little bit of your stories, because
Sure.
I find it fascinating. I'd like to.
Sure.
We're going
Absolutely.
to be working together. I'd like to get to know you a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll start with Anita.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'm Anita Fossbender, and I'm the operations director here at the Independent Record and member of the editorial board.
And are you from Montana originally?
I am from Montana. I grew up in Lincoln,
Oh, good.
Montana, outside of
One
Illinois.
of my first trips was through Lincoln.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, went to school, graduated at MSU.
Okay, great. Yeah,
I was telling Amy about Cat Fan.
good. Go Cats.
Yeah.
Let me go around that way.
All right. I'm Tyler Miller. I'm the publisher with the Independent Record and the Montana Standard. Fairly new to Montana. Been here about 2.5 years. And
Where's home?
all over. I'm originally from Colorado. Graduated high school in Idaho. My wife's from Seattle, so we lived in Washington for the last 6-7 years prior to moving here.
Yeah, great.
All around.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Greg Lemon. I'm the editor. Been in Montana for 18 years and been to Helena for 3 years. So.
Jesse Cheney, I'm the city editor here. I'm not from Montana. I spent most of my childhood in Colorado, worked for a few newspapers in Northeast Colorado, and then was an editor in New Mexico for about 3 years before I came here.
And you've been here how long?
Been here about 2 years,
Okay.
almost 2 years.
What's your favorite thing about Montana?
The outdoors, I would say. Trails around Helena are always
Yeah.
really nice.
Cool.
I'm James DeHaven, State House reporter from Northern Nevada originally. Most recently, Vegas, where I worked at the Las Vegas Review-Journal for about 3 years. And I've been here about 3 weeks.
3 weeks. So welcome.
Yeah.
You know, we have room here in Montana.
Yes, it's very nice.
Good.
I'm Holly Michaels. I'm one of the statewide reporters. I've been about
welcome.
13 years.
You know, we have.
Lived almost everywhere. Lived in Missoula, Hamilton, Hamilton buildings.
And your beat is
Statewide.
statewide. Yeah, great, good. So I'll give you a little bit of my background, if that's all right. And then
That would be
I
great.
want to answer all your questions. So
Yeah. Well, what I kind of thought would be good is to let's do that, and then we'll just jump in with questions. So, yeah.
great. So my background, I first fell in love with Montana 40 years ago. I mentioned earlier that I grew up just west of Philadelphia, in the suburb of Philadelphia, and I had a junior high school science teacher who flew P-51s in World War II and trained up at Maelstrom. And the only way he could afford to come here on a teacher's salary was to bring 2 van loads of ninth graders with him every summer. So he loaded up 2 vans of ninth graders. We drove all the way to Red Lodge. And then we spent all the summer up in the backcountry in the Ozarks. And then my second trip connected me with Lincoln. When I was in college, by myself, I took the train from Philadelphia to West Glacier and met a buddy, the one who works for the Forest Service now. And we hiked from Spotted Bear Lake.
Oh, okay.
So across the Bob, just the two of us, which was kind of cool. So I fell in love with the backcountry and just knew this is where I want to make a life. My wife and I were both engineers. I'm an electrical engineer, and my master's is computer science. My wife has a bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering and then an MBA. We had 3 little boys on the East Coast, and then we met at Bell Laboratories, where we worked out of school. It's actually kind of funny. We met, it's not very romantic, but we met at the donut table after giving blood. So, and again, it wasn't romantic, but it worked out. We've been married 27 years. Our daughter, our 4th child, was born in Bozeman. So in 1995, we loaded up the Ford Bronco, put all the kids in diapers in the back, and drove all the way across the country to the home we live in today. And it was in that home that I'd always been in the software business. After Bell Laboratories, I started a series of software businesses, and they grew and had a fair amount of success. And we had this idea that the internet has the potential to remove geography as a constraint in where you locate a business. So we had this idea that we could start a global technology business in a rural state like Montana. And we got here, and we moved into the house that we still live in today, just north of Bozeman. And people said, well, you can't do that here. And we said, well, we're going to give it a try anyway. And that has been an amazing experience. We found that when you combine a Montana work ethic with good leadership, you can make just about anything possible. So we started our home with no outside capital, and that business grew to be 1,100 employees over a 15-year period. We took it public in 2004, and our average wage in Bozeman was almost $90,000 a year. And if there's one thing I think Montana needs is more high-wage jobs. And I've always felt that the purpose of work is to serve others. And we did that in our business. That business was purchased by Oracle in 2012. Every employee that wanted a job got a job in Bozeman. Oracle continues to be the largest commercial employer there in Bozeman. In fact, we just broke ground on a new global network operations center for Oracle, which will bring their total space in Bozeman to 120,000 square feet of office space. This network operations center is kind of cool. They came to us and said, we need a building with a 5,000 square foot room that's not on the first floor with 12-foot ceilings so we can put high definition TVs all the way around. It's going to be like a NASA command center for their entire global cloud. There's only 3 of them in the world. There's one in Asia, there's one in London, England, and there's one in Bozeman. It's also a customer visit center, so they're going to be flying all the top customers into Bozeman to do the dog and pony show, to sell their cloud services, which I was really pleased about. That business was really the beginning of technology companies getting started in the Gallatin Valley. We now have about 80 technology businesses there. Many of them spun out of right now. And they've spun out not just in Gallatin County, they've also spun out to Beaverhead County and up to Missoula and other places. One of the things I am most proud of is that in 2014, according to the University of Montana, almost 40% of all the wage growth in the entire state occurred in Gallatin County. And we've seen what that does to a community in terms of creating jobs. It's not just the tech jobs, because in our business, only about 10% of the jobs were techie jobs. They also created sales jobs, accounting jobs, legal jobs. And then when you bring a high wage job into a community, the next thing that family does is buy or build a home. And that creates construction jobs and then real estate jobs, restaurant, and retail. So it's a virtuous cycle that really helps. So as I said, that business was sold. And now the question is, what's next? Well, we've raised our family here. I love Montana. We've chosen this as our home. And I just look at the fact that we're 49th nationally in wages. We've shown we can create high wage jobs here. So I've decided to enter the governor's race because we'd like to see better outcomes for people. And as I've traveled around the state, as you know, we filed exploratory in August. We announced officially last week after doing hundreds and hundreds of meetings all over the state. So I'm happy to share some of what we've learned as we traveled around. But people clearly want new leadership. And so that's a little bit of my background.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. I got lots of questions that just jumped into my head, and then we talked about some as well. But you talked about workforce and the need for higher paying jobs. We in Helena specifically, we have about, varies obviously depending on the week, but somewhere around 700 job openings. And the problem here isn't the number of jobs. The problem here is the number of employees. Mm-hmm. So high paying jobs also means better trained employees, I would assume. And when we talk about better trained employees, we get right into the education system, which is going to be, I think, a key issue in the race and in the legislature, next time around. So when you look at a community like Helena and other communities in the state are having the similar issues that have a fairly low unemployment rate, mm-hmm. And a need for employees in a workforce. I mean, how would you tackle that task?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, in most of Montana, we have low unemployment. The challenge is we don't have enough high-wage jobs. And for us, it's interesting. There was a report just released yesterday here in Helena that shows that Montana is one of the top states in the country for exporting young people that have college degrees. So we need to do a better job of just keeping Montanans here. You bring up education, and I think you're right. This is why we started the whole Code Montana program. And it doesn't matter who you talk to, whether it's a contractor, they can't find people with trade skills, tech companies can't find technical people, manufacturers can't find welders. It's just kind of across the board. Today we have a disconnect in education between degrees and certificates that people are pursuing and the opportunities that exist in the marketplace. We need to bring them back into connection. I think there's a couple things we can do. In 2013, in the MUS system in Montana, we only had 40 computer science graduates statewide. That's U of M, MSU, and Montana Tech combined. And it's the reason why we started the Code Montana program, which provided free computer science curriculum to every high school and middle school in the state. And it's essentially a demand creation program. We got the curriculum, we did it in the private sector from some guys out of Stanford, and we had 1,200 kids participate the first year. We also took a professor from MSU who, prior to being a professor in computer science, was a stand-up comedian. And we allowed him, he does 15,000 student presentations a year in high schools and middle schools all over the state. The combination of these demand creation programs, in the last 2 years, we've seen a 54% increase in enrollment in computer science at MSU. I think that's directionally correct. Tech saw a 53% increase, and U of M saw a 27% increase in computer science. Now, the solution is not to turn everybody into a techie, but this tech industry in the state, we started a nonprofit trade association 18 months ago called the Montana High Tech Business Alliance. And U of M did an economic impact study for us last year. We learned that this sector, high tech and skilled manufacturing, currently is almost 15% of the state economy. It's growing 8 to 10 times faster than the state economy, and it's creating jobs that are double the state median. We want more high-wage jobs. We need more of that, right? So we're looking at how do we remove obstacles to growth. More computer science education is a piece of it. In addition, I think we push too many of our young people into 4-year degree programs. If you look at the MUS system, our 6-year graduation rate is only 45%. So we have young people making lifestyle choices as opposed to career decisions. And they end up with a lot of debt, and they may not end up with a job. This is why I've been such a strong proponent for 2-year education, particularly in trade skills. I think there's things we could do with some tax credits to help employers fund manufacturing, either welding and machining degrees. That's why we committed personal resources to create the Gianforte Manufacturing Scholarship Program. A year ago, we worked with the Commissioner of Higher Education on that. And we've now had 287 veterans and lower income Montanans take part in that program. In fact, we just featured one of them this week, Jameson, who was up in the Flathead, went to Flathead Valley Community College. He was had started a family, had 2 little girls, worked in retail, was having trouble making ends meet. He got one of our scholarships, went to Flathead Valley, learned how to run a machine. He's now working at Proof Technologies, making guns up there. And in his words, he said, you know, I can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. I can pay my rent, I can support my family. And we need to help people gain skills so they can get a job that allows them to support a family. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah.
But
Well, so, you know, and I mean, there's some of this stuff that's going on. I mean, you referenced it, you know, and Helena College here locally has worked really hard in collaboration with like Boeing and other manufacturing companies to, you know, to train kids or students to be employable the day they walk out of school. And you know, if you talk to Dean or Daniel Bingham, I mean, he'll tell you, you know, a lot of these guys and gals have a job before they're done school and a high-paying job.
Yeah.
So is this something that you're talking about, the changes that you want to make? Is this enhancing what's already happening? Is it because, you know, there's always the traditional debate, Republican, Democrat, big government, limited government. government intervention is part of what's making it go now. So do you enhance that? Do you,
Yeah, I think we should be investing in education. Particularly, I think
when you say we, meaning, because you talk
collectively,
about
we as a society,
as
as
a-
a state government, yeah.
Okay.
I think that, we ought to have computer science in every high school.
Mhm.
And some other states have done some interesting things. They've actually said that computer science can be an alternative graduation requirement replacing a foreign language, which I think is kind of interesting, because you can't put it there as another option if it doesn't contribute to graduation requirements, and you can't replace a math requirement, because if somebody's going to go into engineering, they've got to graduate with all the calculus they can get. So some states have now said computer science, it is a foreign language for most people. If you don't take French, maybe you take Java as an alternative graduation requirement. I think that's something we could do. I do think, though, that from an education policy perspective, particularly at K through 12, we really have two different realms. One are our rural communities. I was up in Saco recently. There's 44 kids, K through 12, in the Saco school. I counted 15 full-time staff there, teachers. That's 15 full-time staff that I counted for 44 kids, right? And because our farmers are getting more and more efficient, tractors are getting bigger, and we're not getting any more land, there's negative pressure on the population. What we need to do is figure out how to add some new economic cylinders on the engine to bring vibrancy back into these communities. Because as people continue to leave and our farmers get more efficient, the economics just go upside down. And I worry, I think the goal in education is really simple and something we can all agree on. In education, we've got to help every child reach their full potential. And I think if the next Einstein is born in Saco, Montana, what's the chance that they're going to have a world-class calculus teacher there? I think another place I think we should be making investments in education is in our digital academy, because delivery of courseware, I don't think somebody, just because they're in a small rural community, should have less access to AP classes. The digital academy allows us to partner with the local teachers in the public schools to bring more options to the table. So that's another example.
yeah, well, let's go down that trail a little bit. One of the reports that we just heard about recently is the statewide infrastructure report that was done by a group of engineers, and Montana got a D plus, which is better than a D, but not by much. And we've got infrastructure problems that people that rise to the top of people's minds. The pressure that was created on the Bakken, or on the eastern Montana because of the Bakken development. Roads and bridges, that's what people think about when they think about infrastructure. But this report went beyond that.
Yeah.
Schools were a significant part of that. Helena could be a microcosm of what's going on in the state, where you've got some schools that are adequate, some schools that are severely inadequate.
Yeah.
You've got, different pressures, as you say, population pressures on the school, on different schools, different elementary schools, and a community that's really struggling with how do we fix it in the state, which, in my opinion, that's abdicated their responsibility to handling the infrastructure problem that exists in education,
Mhm.
particularly K-12 education around the state.
Well, it's certainly education. We have a responsibility to fund education. We also have a responsibility to fund other infrastructure like water, sewer,
Right.
roads, bridges. And I've been out in eastern Montana now 5 times just since August visiting. And a recent trip I was in Culbertson. The average water bill for a single family home in Culbertson is already $1,200 a year. And because of a lack of leadership here in Helena, it's going up another 18% this year. My heart goes out to people on fixed income that are on Social Security out there. How do they pay for it? The way the state has a responsibility, and we've had infrastructure bills vetoed in 2013, and due to a lack of leadership, there's enough culpability on all sides here in the last session, but it didn't get done. And we have communities that are really hurting as a result.
Well, so let's back up a little bit. So we can let's stick with education. So you talk about the digital academy and expanding those opportunities, but in places in Montana, like Helena, those opportunities are limited because of the infrastructure and the ability to address the infrastructure. I mean, when we have a school here, we have a couple of schools that have problems like this, but one in particular, Bryant, where in the summertime or in the late spring when school and early fall when school is in, classroom temperatures can get to be in the 90s, and in the wintertime can get to be down in the 50s. So getting even your smartest kid to sit in front of a computer or a TV screen to go through a digital academy, you might have all the wires there, but the way school funding is in the state, the local community is mandated to deal with that. If the state comes down with say, hey, we're going to expand these digital academy opportunities, and what's the school district going to do when they say we don't have any help from the state?
I agree with you. I mean, a hot classroom is not conducive to learning. In fact, it's unacceptable. Today, the state spends about $12,500 per student per year. Now, let's just take an average classroom. Let's do the math. Average classroom, 20 students. Okay, so that's $250,000 per classroom. Average teacher in Montana, for the period of time that they work, makes an annual salary of around $50,000. Some make more, some make less, but it's something in that ballpark. So part of the question is, where did the rest of the money go? I'm not arguing for less spending on education, not at all. What I'm saying is that I'm not sure enough money's getting to the classroom.
Getting to the right place. So Montana's got it takes a scientist just to unravel the school funding formula in Montana. As I'm sure you're aware. So do you think it's a systemic problem within the formula that needs to change? You take the same pot of money and you change the formula on how it gets shifted? And if so, what would be some examples that you would advocate?
So in education, I think first off, computers are here to stay, and computer science is a focus. I think for rural schools, it's primarily done through digital academy. In larger municipalities like Helena here, we need more STEM teacher training to get them up to speed so they can help. I think the dual credit stuff that's been pursued, that's directionally correct as well. We have a lot of requirements today, like a computer science professor at MSU is not qualified to teach computer science in high school in the state of Montana. Right, so that doesn't make total sense to me. I think we could make it a little easier to bring some resources to bear in some of these places. But again, the goal of education has got to be to help every child reach their full potential. And the state absolutely has a vested interest and needs to have a commitment to provide for infrastructure. And we've just not done a very good job, even though we're sitting on almost $500 million of overpaid taxes. So the resources are there. We just need to put the right plans in place.
So one of the hot button issues the last two sessions, or more than that, 3 or 4 sessions, has been the school choice and different iterations of legislation, that would be tax credits or different ideas, and I'm sure you're well aware of. And where do you come down on that?
So as I said, I think there's 2 policies that are really required. One for the rural schools, and the economics don't support multiple schools. In larger communities like Helena, I am a believer in more parental choice in education. In every state that's enacted that, we've seen academic performance in the public schools go up. And again, back to the high level objective, which help every child reach their full potential. It's been shown that when parents have more say, you get better outcomes. Specifics, there's a bill that passed the House and the Senate, and our current governor allowed to become law. I think that's a good piece of legislation. The tax credit scholarship bill that passed in this last session. I do think some of the contribution limits were arbitrarily low. But I played football in high school, and we were a championship team. And the way we won games was not by throwing Hail Mary passes. It was by running 3 to 5 yard plays. And when I'm elected governor, in every area that's of interest, whether it's education or tax policy or healthcare or administration, my approach would be to work with experts and run 3 to 5 yard plays, not run Hail Mary passes. Because when you do that, the ball gets dropped and it starts going the wrong direction on the field. Right? And directionally for education, the guiding principle has got to be to help every child reach their full potential.
Go ahead.
Along with that, recently down in Texas, you probably saw a number of schools, especially the elementary schools, increase the number of recess, the length of time of recess, and they saw dramatic increases in scores. So how do you come down on that with, how do you balance kids with workload? I look at my kids right now coming out of elementary school. My kids were up till 9 o'clock last night doing homework, and this is a 4th grader.
Yeah.
Seems like, and when he gets home, he doesn't have any time to do anything but do homework. He practices piano because he takes piano. And they're so focused on getting so much additional education, which I think is important. How do you balance that with the work-play balance at the same time trying to help those kids reach that full potential?
Yeah, so you ask a very good question. I've raised 4 kids, and my daughter just went off to college last year, and I'm kind of on the other side now, looking back, trying to learn. And I got involved in education primarily because of our own kids, and it is a balance. I don't have the specific solution for you. There are people that have committed their lives. We have great teachers in our schools. We have good schools in the state of Montana. We've got, and yet only 23% of our high school graduates in the state are proficient in reading, writing, math, and science. So again, if we go back to how do we help every child reach their full potential, we love our schools. We love our public schools. I think we have good private schools. We have to work together on figuring ways to get better outcomes. I've been chairman of a K through 12 school in Bozeman for over 10 years. It was interesting recently, the ACT scores came out, and Bozeman schools did very well, the public schools. I think they had an average ACT score of 22, whereas the national average is 20. The school I'm chairman of, the average ACT score was 29. And it's not because we select kids. All kids are welcome, but we're doing things differently. I think there's opportunity for innovation. Again, we have dedicated teachers in our schools, but we've got to look at some new ideas, and particularly digital delivery is one of them, to complement the teachers in their classrooms.
Last session, Governor Bullock put forward the Early Edge Montana program. It got a lot of, some support from outside the Helena in the Capitol, but it didn't ultimately find any success in the session. There's a lot of science out there and a lot of research that points to the importance of that pre-K education. The soft skills is sort of what they say, and rather than the actual sort of STEM sciences. Where do you come down on that? I mean, and I guess, one other question, if you're chairman of a school, does that school offer kindergarten or?
We have kindergarten, we have a preschool. Preschool's for 4th graders. It's half day, 3 days a week. So it's a
4-year-olds, right?
4-year-olds. Is that
You said
Fourth
4th graders.
Oh yeah, 4-year-olds. I'm sorry.
If your 4th graders are in preschool, then I don't know.
That's why they do so well.
I don't know if I trust your ACT score.
But I think that's a parental choice issue again. We have preschools in the state. Enacting a statewide preschool program would not be a top priority for me in education. I think there's other places we can apply the money, like computer science in the high schools, like in helping people get trade skills, like training STEM teachers at later. I've also seen reports that I think are very reliable that show that a lot of the work that's done in preschool disappears by the time they're in 3rd grade. So I'm a believer in it, but I think there's other places we can apply those resources and actually have, again, the goal being helping every child reach their full potential.
Right. So with that being the goal, preschool options now, not all of them. Head Start is sort of for the low income option for preschool.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of kids that from a preschool standpoint that slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
That slip through the cracks all the way, for a lot,
Yeah,
in
and if
any
we-
sort of organized, constructive education till they get to public schools. How do we increase the outcomes for them?
Yeah, so we have preschools in the state, and people. This is the most disappointing aspect of education today. I think is that people of low income are disadvantaged. People with means have options. People without as much means don't have options. If we decide that collectively as a society we want more preschool, let's make it easier for low income people to get into preschool programs. This is why we started the whole ACE scholarship program in the state and committed a significant amount of resources to help low income Montanans get an educational option that matched what the parents wanted for their kids. We now have, and we were honestly overwhelmed by the demand of the state. We now have 750 kids on scholarship. And without any promotion, we have a massive waiting list of other families. There's clearly a huge demand for better outcomes for their kids. Now, if a current school is fitting a child well, then stay with it. But what we've learned is that one size doesn't fit all in education. Again, we have good teachers in our public schools. We have good public schools. But it's not the perfect fit for every child.
I want to jump back to infrastructure again. To circle all the way back to the bill last session, and you talked about it, that your position was it needed better leadership to get through. That bill ended up being a combination of bonding and cash for a variety of projects, including some that are near and dear to Helena.
Yeah.
One in particular, the Historical Society, a project that we advocated for as a newspaper and as an editorial board, I guess, as an editorial board. But so I guess the question I have is, where did you fall down with, where did you come down on that piece of legislation? And the infrastructure needs aren't going away. So we would assume safely, I think, that there'll be another infrastructure bill in the next session, and it'll, probably have some of the similar debates. Well, I'm guessing, my assumption is there'll be a discussion on how much to bond and how much to pay in cash, or whether to do any bonding.
Yeah, and I don't have a principled objection to bonding, although I think we should pay for infrastructure with cash if we can. I think the state, now we've kind of kicked the can down the road. We kicked it down the road in 13, we kicked it down the road in 15, and let's ignore, in fact, who's responsible for all that. It just didn't happen. Right?
Right.
So now we're in a position 6 years later, and we haven't had an infrastructure bill. I would be supportive of an infrastructure bill. I would also say that if I had to make the priority list of what we're going to spend money on, I would put water, sewer, bridges, and roads higher than a history museum. Because I think those are our core obligations in terms of core services to the people of Montana.
So if a bill came through and it went past the House and the Senate based on 100% bonding or 75% bonding, and it hit your desk as governor, are you going to say, no, I don't like the way this is funded? Or because it went through the House and Senate, do you let it go on?
Well, I'm not going to comment on a hypothetical bill, but I will
Absolutely,
say,
yeah.
I don't think, as governor, I will not allow a bill to come to my desk without collaboration with the legislature. I don't think, we've had a number of administrations here who said, send it to me, I'll decide if I'll sign it. That's not my leadership style, right? I'd be able to give clear direction to House and Senate leadership about what would be acceptable to me and what would not be acceptable to me. And I've shared with you my preferences. I'd rather use cash than bonding. Although I don't have a principled opposition to bonding if there's a core need that's required. And I think it trumps the downside of adding bonding, right? So I can't give you a specific answer.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there a bill with bonding that I would sign? Probably. It wouldn't be my preference. But it depends on what the need is. Now, if we've kicked the can down the road so far that we have some desperate needs in the state, I'd want to learn those and understand those with the legislature, and this is what you do in business, right? You sit down with the facts and you make a decision.
So does the state have enough cash to cover its infrastructure needs?
Well, we've been kicking the can down the road. I think I think in this next session, we also have missed an opportunity in this last session because we had some, I think the way we increase state revenue is with a vibrant private sector. And the only way that happens is if we have entrepreneurs and small business people starting and growing businesses. If we had a more vibrant private sector, we'd actually have more cash flow. We'd have more money to pay for infrastructure. So I think the first step and the number one thing I'd be focused on is creating an environment where our businesses can succeed so that we can create more prosperity, just like we did in Gallatin County, that creates a larger tax base. And Gallatin County, as I understand it, is the only county in the state that didn't have to raise their mill levies the maximum amount in this last go-round because we have such a vibrant local private sector. I'd like to see some of that vibrancy around the state. So I think the economy's got to be the primary thing. And we have some things in the state that get in the way. As I've traveled, business owners over and over again talk about being tied up in knots and regulations. And, I'm not suggesting we have no regulations because we want a clean environment. We need people to not take advantage of the system. But between anarchy, where we have no rules, and strangulation, where we have too many, most Montana business people I talk to think we're way over here close to strangulation. What I'm talking about is some balance back in the system.
So which regulations would you like to see done away with?
Well, there's a bunch. I mean, in the state, we have licensure rules for dozens and dozens of professions. A number of them, there's no certification and there's no test. But there's a form you got to fill out to get it approved. I mean, it's just silly. I was talking to a business owner here in Helena recently who's a contractor, and he shared two things with me that I think are indicative of the problem. There's no one silver bullet here. What business owners say, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. These are so this builder said, if I go on a job site and I get dirt on my shoes, and then I walk into the street, it's not dirt anymore, it's a pollutant, and I get fined by DEQ. Well, it's kind of hard to keep dirt off your shoes in a job site. Now, clearly, we don't want debris dumped in our streams or wetlands or any of this stuff, but that's different than tracking some dirt into the street. Another builder here in Helena relayed a story to me. He was doing a remodel on a strip mall here in Helena, and it was his fourth remodel on the same strip mall in 5 years. And the 3 prior times, he had paid for a certification that said there was no asbestos in this building. Well, nobody snuck in there at night and put asbestos in that building. So he's doing the 4th remodel. He has 15 guys working on the job. DEQ shows up and says, I need your asbestos certification. He hands him the 3 prior ones he had done in the last couple of years. They said, no, we need one for this job. So he had to send 15 people home for 2 days while he went and did the certification. So we need to bring a little common sense back to the process. And part of that, we have good, dedicated state workers. It's not the state workers, it's the leadership. And I've been very clear. One of the things I would do, I would work to appoint leaders of state agencies and commissions who have actually worked in the industry that they're serving. So I'd like to see an industry person in charge of DEQ. Not to eliminate all the rules, but to bring some understanding. And in DNRC, I'd like to see a landowner in charge of DNRC. And I'd like to see somebody in the Department of Labor who's actually had an employee before.
Yeah, I mean, you recognize, though, that by doing that, you'd invite questions as to that appointee's allegiances at the end of the day. How would you defend
So
those?
that's a really good question, because I think our allegiance in state government is to the people of Montana, not to government. That's why I would favor industry people over government insiders. I think what happens when people are not well led, they find ways to bring importance to their work. And without a clear vision, people end up hiding behind a rule book. And we end up with a culture of enforcement in agencies rather than a culture of customer service. I'd much rather have that DEQ employee sit down with a contractor and say, Joe, want to help you get all the permits you need for this project. Let me walk you through what you need to do. And, I have a question on this form. Let me help you with that. Well, the way it works today is you send the form in, and they send it back and say it's wrong. And then you got to try again. You send it in, and you might get it right the second time. And you look across the state. We have, like, I'll go a little broader with DEQ. This Montanore mine up in Lincoln County, they've been trying to get a permit for 11 years. I think a department ought to be able to say yes or no faster than that. I'm not suggesting you say yes to everything, but it shouldn't take 11 years to say maybe.
So the DEQ, I mean, just from a, they're, in my mind, they have more of a regulatory responsibility, and they'd say maybe DNRC. I mean, all the state agencies that have the regulatory obligation, but I guess the way I've just assumed that it works is that the people trust the agency to do the regulation because the agency is serving the public. And so the regulation is in part to protect the public or, maybe to protect employees. So sort of dovetailing off of James's question, if you have an industry person in charge of an agency like DEQ, then how do you ensure that the public's interests?
Oh, we got to follow the law.
Well, but you and I agree that the law, especially on regulations, is always black and white. As you talked about,
Yeah.
There's obviously a way to get that asbestos certification done quicker. And I don't think any rational person would disagree with you.
Mhm.
But in front of DEQ now is the Tintina project in Marv County, which has a broad interest around the state from a variety of people. And in Montana's historic past and recent past are fantastic examples of the failure of mining companies to do what they said they were going to do and clean up after they left. So, how do you balance that? I understand the idea of appointing an industry person at DEQ, but how do you balance the need for regulatory?
We all want a clean environment, but I think the core issue in Montana is we're 49th in the country in wages, and DEQ in particular has been delaying permits. Otter Creek, the state took $86 million from Arch Coal and then didn't give them a permit to dig coal out of the ground. You look at the Bull Mountain Mine, which we just had massive layoffs. We've seen 500 people lose their jobs in the timber industry. The administration is kind of in a bubble all by themselves. You drive out to Colstrip. I met with the families that are working out there. I've been up in Libby. Their livelihoods have been taken away. Unemployment's the highest in the state. The regulation tail is wagging the job creation dog right now. It's the problem. So I'm not suggesting you get rid of all regulations. I'm just saying I want to bring a little sanity back to the process. Common sense is just not that common anymore. And by appointing industry people, I want to bring a culture of customer service to these agencies to understand that the purpose of government is to serve the people, not the other way around. And that's all people.
You've obviously built a very successful business under the existing regulations in the state. What, if you can do it, why can't other people?
We weren't in the natural history. We were not in the natural resources industry.
So you're talking about regulations specific to natural resources.
Well, we had issues. We had issues too with employment. There's more that could be done there. Right now in the state of Montana, part of this is administration as well, just understanding, trying to get in the shoes of the citizen, the average Montanan who's trying to start a business. If you have payroll in the state of Montana, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, mostly contractors, who have said, listen, I used to have 10 guys on the job or gals. I'm just working by myself right now because I don't want to do all the paperwork for the state. If you want to file payroll, do you know today you have to go to 2 separate web pages? You have to have 2 separate logins and 2 separate passwords. Every single small business in the state has to do that. There's just it's structured for the convenience of government as opposed to the convenience of the citizen. And those are the sorts of things that I would change.
You mentioned Colstrip, and I think that's a pretty interesting example because my understanding is you said that you would fight the Clean Power Plan in an effort to preserve coal jobs. Is that correct?
yeah, I think it's the costly power plan is a huge overreach on the part of the federal government.
And I think some people would argue that that would come at the expense of polluting the environment. How would you balance the need for a clean environment with the need for jobs?
Well, nobody cares more about a clean environment than Montanans, and myself included. 1 year of forest fires in Montana puts over 1,000 years of coal strip carbon into the air. Right? What we need to do is we need to be pushing back a lot harder on the federal government, particularly in their management of our forests. If we're truly concerned about the environment, if we managed our forests, we'd have more wildlife, we'd have less forest fires, we'd be healthier because we wouldn't have to breathe the smoke every summer. We'd have more timber going into our mills, and we'd be creating more jobs. It's a virtuous thing. Honestly, as I've spoken with people in the timber industry, we've lost 500 jobs in timber this year alone. But I've talked to people in the timber industry. The state does a pretty good job managing state lands. But the federal government, because of all the litigation they get tied up in, have been unable to manage the federally owned public lands well. So in the case of the costly power plant, when Colstrip shuts down, if it does, we're going to lose 7,000 jobs in Montana. Every single person's electric bill is going to go up by 16%. We're going to lose $150 million in state revenue every year, and we've got to make that up someplace else. You and I are going to have to pay that. And it's going to have negligible impact on the environment. The reports, even from the EPA, say it's only going to improve the temperature by 0.02 of a degree over the next 50 or 60 years, whatever the number is. And 1,000 years of carbon is coming from forest fires. It's just, we got the tail wagging the dog.
So do you think there needs to be, can what's happening now continue forever? Or, do you see a way to maybe have a...
I'm a believer in American ingenuity.
Mm-hmm.
And conceptually, having less carbon go into the air, that's a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? I saw, the doom and gloom people said by the year 2000, we're going to be out of oil. Well, American ingenuity was applied, and all of a sudden, we have all the oil we need. In fact, gas prices are as low as they've ever been. If we're going to burn coal, we need to burn it cleanly. But Montana was singled out in this costly power plan for the largest carbon reductions of any state in the entire country. We were unduly persecuted. I believe, honestly, it's an infringement on our state sovereignty under the 10th Amendment. This is what Attorney General Tim Fox argued in his lawsuit against the EPA.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, again, I think we have, there are mixed motives in the groups that are attacking coal.
Do you think the emission requirements should be reduced or eliminated?
I think we ought to be working to do both of those. We ought to use every tool in the box we have. We ought to use persuasive arguments. We ought to be using legal arguments. We ought to be coordinating with the surrounding states that have similar interests in coal, whether that's Wyoming or Idaho. And we ought to be making clear the consequences. If this plan stays in force, it will be the largest catastrophic economic event in Montana in over 30 years. And I think that's bad for Montana. Because my hope as a dad is that, and I think many Montana families share this, is we'd like to have our kids around the table on Sunday afternoon. And if we don't have an economy, it's not going to be possible.
I think one thing I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about, the flip side of that argument is people are saying, well, coal's just not economically viable anymore. You look at the write-down of the value of the plant, you look at moves being made in Oregon and Washington. You can argue they're making those for a lot of different reasons, but one is that, natural gas is really low, there's other places to get it. So what would be your response to someone saying, well, there's economic pressures if you take out the whole environmental concerns there?
So as a business guy, I wholeheartedly agree. Economics is like gravity. And if in fact coal is less economical than these other sources, we'll cease to use it as a power source.
You mean just as a society, we'll cease to use it as a power source?
What does that mean for the coal workers? And
It would have huge impact. My point is that
It means they'll start putting up windmills.
Yeah.
It means that, we've had, I think all these sources need to compete on an economic basis. Right now, though, there are subsidies for these other things. And the country made a decision, and they've been in place. But Montana is resource rich, and due to state policy that's been delaying and denying permits, we haven't been able to access our resources. Now we need to do it responsibly. We've lost 500 jobs in timber so far this year because of litigation associated with managing our forests properly. And the overreach by the federal government threatens entire communities in the state. And I just think that we need to back up a little bit and understand the bigger picture here and what are we really trying to accomplish. And I think that the core issue for Montana and the platform I'm running on is that we're 49th in the country in wages. And I think personally that one of our biggest opportunities for high wage jobs in the state is natural resources. Now we need to do it responsibly, but I think we can do that. I mean, when I went through the Rosebud mine out there where they're digging the coal, you know where all the mule deer are? It's on the reclaimed parts of the thing. These laws are in place, and as you mentioned, DEQ has these regulations, and they're being followed.
Yeah, we're starting to get to the end of our time. I want to be respectful of your time as well. And as I'm switching gears, there's a lot that's been made about just recently about your faith and how that's informed, some decisions you've made. The question that I have is, just your faith is your faith. How do you see your faith informing you as if you were governor?
Yeah, so I'm a Christian. My faith is important to me. And honestly, it's part of what draws me to serve the state of Montana because I want to use my skills in a way that helps as many people as possible. It would be no different in my position as governor than it was in the business we were in. I'm running for one reason, and that's because we're 49th in the country in wages, and I'm a business guy, and I think I have a set of skills that can help in that regard.
So, Montana is a pretty diverse state, and people have a lot of ranging views on faith and family values and all those sorts of things. How as governor and a Christian and a man of faith, as you've said, how do you respect all those different values? How do you consider them if you're governor?
So I think Christianity is not about forcing your views on anybody, right? And in our business, we hired people of all backgrounds solely based on their ability to contribute, and they got promoted based on their actual contributions. I wouldn't run the state any differently.
What about like policy decisions? I mean, how do you
the good people who contribute would get promoted,
Yeah,
and they get more responsibility.
not just personnel decisions, but you've got policy decisions like natural resources policies or infrastructure policies or school policies.
So ask me a specific question.
So how does your faith inform those policy decisions?
What you see is what you get. I'm here. I'm happy to answer any specific question you have.
Okay.
So if a non-discrimination bill were to hit your desk as governor, would you reject that based on, that it contradicts with your beliefs, or would you go with what the legislators and voters are asking you to do?
Yeah. So first, in governor, I represent the people. In our business, we hired people of all faith backgrounds, of all political backgrounds, different sexual orientations, and but we didn't consider any of that in the hiring process. We hired people based on their ability to do a job, and they got promoted based on their contribution. Your question kind of implicitly is a little bit about this NDO executive order that came out last week. And let me be clear, I don't agree with the way the governor did it, but I agree with the sentiment. And at state level, people ought to be hired based on their ability to do a job and promoted based on their contribution.
So how would you have done it differently, the executive order?
I don't know any other way to do it. It's the way we ran our business, and it's the way I would run the state.
So you're saying that would sort of obviate the need for an executive order because
Discrimination is wrong, and it shouldn't be tolerated.
I've got a question from somebody who's watching, who's been tweeting at us. You've talked a lot about raising wages as a central focus of your campaign. Virginia Brown sent us a question asking about the minimum wage and what you think would be an appropriate minimum wage in Montana if it should be changed.
Yeah, so thank you for your question. I believe where we need to focus is on creating jobs that warrant higher wages. I would not be a proponent for arbitrarily raising the minimum wage because I think it reduces employment opportunities for people. And we need ways for people to come into the workforce. So
I jump in with one more, going back a little bit to earlier discussion, or is that going to blow us
Sure.
water time-wise? So you talked earlier, we were talking about schools, about kicking the can down the road. And one thing we've been looking at lately, going back to school facilities funding.
Yeah.
Last time Montana really took a good look at it was 2008. And then they found there's about $160 million of unmet need out there. And who knows what that is today, because schools don't have the ability to really stay on top of that. It's replacing boilers, it's foundation leaks, it's all that. And you mentioned classrooms get this much money and teachers would pay this much, and where does that money go? But schools are, just sort of saying they can't keep up with these needs. And we have quality schools grant program, but that wasn't even funded last session. So we had something, I think there were $32 million of requests made to that can't even be filled.
Yeah.
So what do you think the state can do to address those needs?
So I think in any situation, I've never been in a situation where I have unlimited resources and the ability to fund every single thing I want to do. I mean, no business is in that situation. This newspaper isn't in that situation. I'm sure you'd like to have an Olympic swimming pool out back or something. I don't know. But you're talking about core stuff that's really at the heart of it.
One of the things funded from that too is technology grants. And they've only ever done 2 out of that program. And that's one of the places that money to put more computers in classrooms and make them ready to do what you want students to be able to do. So they're not really paying for it. So
Part of the challenge right now is even if you gave them a bunch more computers, they don't have the network resources or the plugs to be able to plug those computers in or get them online.
Yeah. So, yes, it's all good stuff. The question is what I think there are areas in education we should be spending more money. I would want to work with the legislature and the people running our schools to understand what their priorities are. I'm not going to arbitrarily dictate that this boiler is more important than a laptop. We have an obligation to effectively fund education in the state of Montana. And as I said, I think there's areas of increased investment. But that doesn't mean a blank check for everything. And that's the challenge every leader faces. You got to balance this. You do it at home. It's like, do I take that trip this year or do I buy the RV? Do I whatever those decisions are.
Yeah, if there's areas in education where we need to be spending more money, does that imply that there's areas where we need to be spending less, given current resource constraints in the budget?
I don't know that that's. I don't have any. No immediate ones occur to me.
So how do you do both?
Well, we have a $500 million surplus. As I think about it, I would advocate. We haven't talked about this yet, but I would advocate a path to eliminating the business equipment tax because I think it's one of the most regressive taxes we have. I think this tax simplification bill that passed the House and the Senate in the last session, I would have signed that. That would have left us, if you did those 2 things, you'd still have a $300 million surplus, which leaves at least $200 million or so for infrastructure. And then collectively, myself as governor and the House and the Senate decide what our priorities are. Is that a new sewer system in Culbertson or a water system in Roundup or a boiler for Shelby? I mean, these are and again, I'm using an excessive amount of detail here, but to just try to illustrate the balance you have to have and trying to make these decisions. My approach in leadership has always been to get the concerned parties around the table and everybody's welcome. You have a robust discussion and you make the best decision you can with the available information. And then you move forward. And again, my bias is always towards 3 to 5 yard plays, not whole Hail Marys, because I think you can make a lot of progress. Again, winning football games is done by getting your first down and then solidifying your position and running the next set of plays. In every area, education, tax, infrastructure, I think we need to figure out what the 3 to 5 yard plays are in each one of those areas, and then let's go run them.
Thanks for coming to see us.
My pleasure.
It was a great discussion.
Yeah, I enjoyed the visit.
Appreciate
Yeah,
you taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to come back. If you have follow-up questions, let me know.
great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.